Greetings, everyone. My name is William Porter. Welcome to this edition of Storytelling Time. This program is brought to you by Everett Black Entrepreneurs Network. And we're happy to have with us again today, Lou Everett and Sherry McManus of the Lou Everett Group. And of course, Lou and Sherry were with us last week, and we started talking about the series, John C. Maxwell series of the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And I have my copy right here, and I've been reading it faithfully over the last 2 or 3 months, ever since your Mastermind series, which started, I believe, I think as early as the latter part of September. But anyway, for those individuals watching and listening who maybe did not get to know or hear you as you expressed what you do professionally, again, tell everybody about your business.
Sure.
Sure, yeah, you did this last time. Well, you can do it this time, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can do it.
I can do it. That's fine. Yeah. No problem at all. So Sherry and I are a husband and wife duo. We are the Lou Everett Group. We're business and executive leadership coaches and corporate trainers. Our focus is to help small businesses, as business owners specifically, and professionals in the corporate world, to achieve over a 500% growth in their business and professional life through our proprietary coaching system, and through things like the mastermind that you attended and things like that, beginning with personal growth. And our passion truly is to help transform today's leaders.
Okay, well, great. Well, the last time, if you remember, and I'm sure you do, we finished talking about the environment and how important the environment is to contribute to all of our personal growth. Mm-hmm. And we also mentioned, of course, that sometimes that's easier said than done. It's quite challenging for some people to get into that right environment, but it's really necessary. But this week, we want to start with Maxwell's seventh law. And his seventh law is the law of design. The law of design. And I have a pad here that I've probably shown you before. And every day I write down what I plan to do during the course of a day. And I'm sure no one can quite understand it like I can, which is intentional, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
But the important thing is that I understand it. But the thing is that as I read through Maxwell's chapter on design, the law of design, what I got from it was that it's all about planning. Would you agree with that? And tell us about this law of design that Maxwell was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the law of design, as Maxwell states, is to maximize growth, right? Not just growing and then kind of being stagnant, but to maximize growth and develop strategies to do it. And the way you go about doing that is to plan accordingly. Plan your growth out. What are you going to do tomorrow, the next day, next month, next quarter as business owners, or next year? Especially as we are now approaching the new year. We should have, what are you doing? What is your plan? Have you sat down and evaluated how the year went? Or do you plan on doing that so that you can make a plan accordingly to maximize your growth moving into the first quarter of the year? And on a personal side, the same thing, even if you don't own a business. What is your plan for personal growth? How are you going to strategize on that? Now, again, like anything else, it's not easy. I mean, many of us have never really been taught that it's important to have a plan for personal growth. We just figure, well, we're just going to learn along the way, right? That's just kind of the nature of life. But that's not how it works. So you can, but to maximize that growth, you want to take and strategize it. Create a plan for your personal growth.
And that's actually what was just, it's funny you say that, because that's one of the growth gaps, is that we just will happen to go in growth, or we'll just grow as we, go along in our environment, and that's the assumption gap. And that goes along with the law of awareness. So even though, subconsciously we're going through it, but when you go through this book chapter by chapter, you'll see that how relatable it is. It's like, oh, okay, I can see that. I do that. And then, but good thing is that there's a way to have a plan to go forward. And this is what the law of design is, that, every time we have a vacation, right, we plan it out. You plan every little detail, every little thing that you want to bring, clothes, shoes, you name it. Imagine it, we feel it, we put it in the suitcase, and we plan those out. Well, the same concept is the same thing we should do with our growth as well. And we don't think about that. We just don't. But again, it goes back to awareness, intentionality, growth, reflection. All of these is all intertwined into one another. So that's why this book is so valuable. Once you realize this, then things start kind of bubbling up and realizing of how amazing this book is.
Yeah, you mentioned this last week that the New Year's resolution that people make very seldom materializes, at least over a long length of time. And by February or March, you can throw those resolutions out the window.
Right. So common.
And a large part of that is because people have not planned their year. And I guess you have to, you don't want to plan too far out, I guess. But on the other hand, you have short range goals and you have long range goals. And so obviously your short range goals are more immediate and you should be more in tune with those goals than you do goals that are a year, 5, 10 years down the road. So
it's just like a car. It's like a vehicle, right, Dr. Porter? I mean, if you're going on a vacation, as an example, and you're planning accordingly, you'll make sure that you're driving to a location for a long distance. You're going to get the oil change. You're going to have the mechanic check all of your fluids. You're going to make sure everything's tightened up. Your brakes are good. You're going to fill it up with gas, and then you're going to be ready for as best as you can for this travel. Well, same with us as people. Okay, you can't have goals and ideas and things you want to accomplish without you. I mean, you need you to make that happen, right? So we've got to invest in us just as much as we invest in that vehicle prior to a vacation. We plan accordingly, which includes self-care to get us to that point. That is essential in order to really design what our empowered future really looks like.
But don't you think it's psychological as well? Because again, as I mentioned, and you all talked about last week, the fact that we have this pandemic, for example, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And some people don't even know if there will be a future. And so it's kind of difficult for people like that to have at least long-term plans, at least. But yet it's necessary, both long and short-term plans.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have to deal with these things now. We're transitioning into the next law of Maxwell, which is the 8th law of pain. Speaking of challenges and pandemics and all of these things that we have to deal with.
That's right.
And, you don't relate pain usually to being necessary to propel yourself forward. So I can see how that can be a motivating factor. But anyway, I'll let you handle that. What's pain got to do with our being successful as in terms of our personal development, in your estimation?
Yeah. You kind of hit it on the head there prior to when we were finishing up the law of design there, that you had said, well, that sometimes it could be psychological. Well, sure it can. That's what makes, as we mentioned in the last episode, that's what makes us humans different than nature and other things, is that is that innate ability to be psychologically impacted and influenced by the things around us. And so the law of pain focuses on how to manage those experiences, especially the bad ones. Because good experiences, we don't have to manage at all, right? We have a great experience, we celebrate it, and we do, we're great, everything's great until a bad experience. And then we're like, well, how do I handle this? And most of the time we handle it based upon what? Based upon our past experiences, based upon our environment, based upon how aware we are, how consistent we are, our environment, how we designed our life, intentionality. All of this plays back into the law of pain. Managing those bad experiences like this pandemic, right? What do we do with this? And us as humans, for some reason, we want to have things familiar. When it's familiar, we're comfortable. Where did that come from? Well, we can certainly delve into the psychological side of things, but that's really not what this podcast is about. But the thing is, it does happen to us.
Well, we're emotional creatures.
That's right.
We're emotional before logical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why if you think back of any childhood or even adulthood, any type of experiences, 8 times out of 10, you'll remember something painful, right? The good times are great, but there's always, for some reason, it's just human nature. We always go back to something that's painful.
Remember the bad moment.
Yeah, we just remember the bad moments. So it's unfortunate. However, if we have the awareness with what we're talking about, you can make those pain points into something great out of them. What lessons did you learn? And that's what reflecting. What did I learn from it? Why does this keep happening to me? Why is there same theme that keeps coming up? Right? Well, maybe there's something in there that needs to be learned. So if you get the right tools and the right people, then is where the growth happens. I mean, how many times have we heard stories out of, this huge resilience of stories? I mean, look at our story, right? I was in a hospital in the ICU in a burn center for 10 days with a rare disease that it was a life and death situation. Remarkably, I came and survived. That's great, right? Well, that's resilience. And I came from that negative situation that I came into a positive situation and reflecting.
Right, but it took the right tools and it took the right resources and the right people to make that happen. So the good management of those bad experiences can really make a difference. And if we need to borrow the good experiences from somebody else to make that happen, then let's do it.
Well, it all goes back to the very first law of being intentional about it.
Yes.
And I love the way that these laws intertwine with one another, although we may be focusing on one law at any given time, but to realize that they all work together.
You do.
They really do. And you mentioned, Sherry, I believe you mentioned comfort. And I got this from this particular chapter, this quotation from Neil Donald Welsh. You may be familiar with this person. And he says that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So Walsh apparently thrives not necessarily on pain. You don't want that. But you have to at least get out of what you're familiar with sometimes, what you're comfortable with sometimes, so you'll be able to grow. Would you agree with that?
Yes, just discomfort. It's okay to be uncomfortable if you've planned it in a way that that's going to cause growth, right? And that's really, and that's where the experiences come from. We had talked about previously. That's where experiences come from, how we can learn from those experiences. We're going to be talking about the law of the rubber band here in a little bit, but it connects to that too, because as we stretch, it becomes uncomfortable. Making change in how we think is uncomfortable, right? If you've taken and talking to anybody who has been in their frame, this is how I do things. I don't do it any other way. Don't tell me another way because it's too uncomfortable for me to think that way.
I am who I am.
I am who I am. But then all of a sudden, if you can somehow, there's a breakthrough and they realize, wait, I've been doing it all this time this way, and it really wasn't working as good as that I just did it this way. Now the experiences change. Well, that's what it comes down to. taking those experiences, finding ways to have that lead to the right type of growth, to great growth. And that can take work, but it takes resources, the tools, and the right people to be around to make that happen.
I taught a number of years, and what I found was that sometimes students don't like to take that easy road. Of course, the good students do. But there is a certain amount of discomfort, for example, if you are preparing to get, say, for example, a good grade out of a particular course. I mean, you have to study, you have to come to class on time, you have to listen to the instructor, and that often involves sitting in the front of the class instead of the back of the class. And all of these X's and O's that you have to do if you want the success that you were talking about. In other words, you have to get out of that comfort zone. And you can apply this to business as well, as a matter of fact, as far as scheduling appointments, keeping appointments, and character. I think maybe it was you, Sherry, that mentioned character, but character is certainly significant as well, even though a lot of people might put it on the back burner. But character is very, very important. I think we're going to get to that, though. So
yes,
I don't necessarily want to. So anyway, the 8th law of pain. So anything else you want to say about pain before we move on to the 9th law?
No, I think we covered that one pretty well. It's just a matter of realizing that we have the ability, okay, and that's what it comes down to. And if there's anything I can get across to any listener right now of the law of pain, this particular law, we spend a lot of time on when we cover it in our masterminds, because it takes up a lot of time, because it's so important, and because there's so much that we can pull out of it. And every one of us have experienced pain in some fashion, or discomfort in some way, and we've all learned lessons in some way from that. Doing that in life, and also can apply to our business as well by failing a lot, and it's okay. But just knowing that you have the power and the ability to learn and turn something into a good experience when it's a bad one.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to go ahead and take a break now, and when we return, we'll get to the 9th law of Maxwell. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're here with Lou Everett and Sherry McManus of the Lou Everett Group out of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. They would be very happy to hear from you if you have any questions for them about personal growth, and especially growth as far as business is concerned. So keep that in mind, and I'm sure that they will give their contact information again at the end of this particular program. But let's move on to the 9th law of Maxwell, and that is the law of the ladder. That was very interesting to me. It was more challenging even to remember the law of the ladder. I didn't understand initially why he used the ladder, for example, although I kind of thought to myself that, well, a ladder has to do with growth. You're stepping upward, right?
Yeah.
But you can also go another direction on a ladder as well. But either way, what I got most from this chapter was the fact that character determines growth. And I think we touched on that. We're getting ready to touch on that a minute ago. So tell us about this particular statement: character determines growth, as it relates to the ladder that Maxwell was talking about.
Yeah. Well, see, character, and just kind of add a little word into there. So character, yes, it does determine growth, but it even does more than that. It determines the height of your growth, right? That's what it runs. It's how high can you go? And the law of the ladders, I think Maxwell may have put this into an interesting perspective, because he works with a lot of corporate executives as well. And of course, there's that executive ladder that people try to grow, right, on a scale too. And the fact of the matter is it's character that really should be driving that growth. Because when it comes to personal growth, we're not talking about external, visible, like what people think about you. This is internal growth. This is who we are personally. that ladder is going to be built based upon how we grow. I'm going to go back to using nature. All right, you look at a vine, and you take a ladder, and if you put out a trellis, like an example, in your garden outside, and there's a vine that begins to grow out of the ground, what is that vine going to do? It is going to find its way up. And as it twists and turns and finds its way up, it begins to grow as well. And it gets higher and it gets higher and it gets higher. See, the law of the ladder, we grow based upon our character and how we grow our character. That's what the law of the ladder states.
Do you think that a lot of us as business people and as people in general take character lightly? In other words, we don't take it as seriously maybe as some of these other cultural or character traits that we can identify as contributing to personal growth. But character is really essential in my estimation. You have to have character in order to see yourself as not only helping yourself, but helping other people. And of course, again, we're going to get to that later. So character is very, very important. The law of the ladder. I don't know whether you've noticed this, but if you, this is not really a ladder, but it's steps. Like when you go up steps, and as you go up, each step, if you notice, once you get to the top of that step, it kind of goes down a little bit, and then it goes up. And then when you get to the top, it then goes down just a little bit. I think this is relating to architectural design. I don't know whether you've noticed that, but the point is that once you get to a certain level, it takes a while to get used to being at that level, and you may even go down a little bit or decrease a little bit as far as what you're trying to do before you can elevate yourself up to an even higher level. Have you ever looked at it in quite that sense or not?
No, I think it's a very good analogy because it makes us pause at that level. And once you make those steps and you've grown, in that analogy, it's time to now let's look at it. Let's reflect. Going back to the law of reflection, let's reflect. How well are we doing? How well are we not doing? Which direction should I go now to move up the next rung on the ladder or the step in my character growth in order for me to continue to see the residuals of this great growth? And I think it's important for us to really look at what that means to us. We need to personally identify and define what we believe is great growth. What does that mean to you personally? To some people, that means, well, a lot of money, or it means a lot of fame, or it means that my business is taken off and I don't have to worry about it. Whatever that great growth means is going to really be important for you and determine what your character is going to be. That's really what it comes down to. Character is something that's an internal component that visualizes itself externally based upon action. Who you are inside will eventually show on the outside, right? That's what character is. And I think it's imperative for us to know, and I love your point, Dr. Porter, that you said it's also how we relate with other people. We can't forget that. We can't forget that our growth certainly relies upon other people. There is this ideology and humanness right now in mankind and people in general that stipulates, I don't need people. I am who I am, and I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Or self-made millionaire.
Or the self-made millionaire analogy, when there's no such thing. Like, you need to care what other people think in true character. We're not saying that you have to abide by what they think, that you have to bow down to what they think. It means that your character is what you do influences other people, and it can influence them in one of two ways, in a negative way or a positive way. So if you don't care what other people think about you, that is your character, then you shouldn't then in turn have any pain in the law of pain. Nothing should then bother you with other people's responses to what it is that you do, because you should be proud of that character. So the question I'm going to leave you with on this is, are you proud of your character?
Okay, great. Well, Lou and Cheryl, we're going to go ahead and take another break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about two very important laws that Maxwell presents, the law of the rubber band and the law of trade-offs. And then we'll close the show.
All right.
So we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. We're here with Lou Everett and Sherry McManus of the Lou Everett Group here in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area. And we finished the last segment talking about the law of, what did we talk about? The law of the ladder is what we talked about last segment. But I'm very interested in knowing about this law of the rubber band. And you've been touching on this the whole while, and I know you have a lot to say about the law of the rubber band. So tell us about, personally, if I might add this, what I get from it is that you grow through adversity. And again, going back somewhat to what we were talking about as far as pain is concerned. But anyway, that's my take of it. But your take as far as the law of the rubber band.
One of my favorites.
I know, one of my favorites too.
Oh, yeah.
If I may, I'll just jump in on
go
this
ahead.
one. So I really like this one too. I mean, we both really love this one because the visual aid on this one is to wear a rubber band around your wrist. And what this signifies, there we go. And what that signifies, as simple as that is that the growth stops when there is less tension between where you are and where that you could be. And the reason why he uses the rubber band is because, think about it, when you have a rubber band, what's its point of a rubber band? Is to hold things in, right? You wrap it around, folders, whatever it may be, and to keep it nice and tight.
Yeah.
But over time, that rubber band will lose that tension. Now, what if you had that same book of, let's say, papers, and you put a really large rubber band on it? It's going to be loose, right? There's no tension in that. Well,
you've got to wind it up.
And you got to wind it up, right? And we like to use it, like, if you had those balls of like the rubber band balls, then there's just like one after another, and it gets bigger and bigger, right? Well, that's it. There's tension in all of that. And you take one out after another. So, which is a great reminder of our growth, is that if it's just loose, we're back to that comfortableness as far as like, well, it is what it is, and I am who I am, then okay, it's very stagnant.
Yeah.
So the rubber band, if you have that on your wrist and actually just snap it just a little bit, will help you remember going, oh, I need a little bit of growth. I need that little bit of stretch. There's a little bit of stretch. Doesn't have to be, this big monument, life epiphany. Like, it doesn't have to be. Even just a little bit better what you do today than you did yesterday goes a long way. And in business sense is that 1%. If you can have a dial of a little knob and hit that little bit to the right or left, that's all that you need. That's all we're talking about here. It goes a long way.
Imagine if you take that rubber band you have there, Dr. Porter, and you're going like this because it stretches, right? Now imagine if it didn't stretch at all. Imagine if rubber bands didn't stretch. What purpose would they serve? They wouldn't serve any purpose. They'd be like string, right? That's all it would be. The purpose so that analogy works out really good, like Sherry had said, is that and I'm going to be straightforward here. You ever feel like you're just flailing around, like, I don't know what I'm doing in my life or my business, or just kind of like, I feel like I don't going from here to there, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't feel like everything's where it needs to be. Well, this is what we're talking about. It's because the tension is not there. You need to be uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable in your growth and in your progress, then you're not following the law of the rubber band. You need to create more tension in order to get from where you are now to where you want to be. It's the only way it's going to work. It's like pressure in your water at home, or pressure in a fire hose. Without the pressure, the water is going to trickle out. It's not going to flow out as it's supposed to. You've got to create the tension in order to see the result.
I was thinking about, I don't drink a lot of sodas, but you can take either a Pepsi or a Coke and you shake the bottle. And thank goodness the top is up there securely, because otherwise the pressure is so great that it would shoot out.
That's right.
Of the bottle. And the same thing is true with the rubber band. The further you stretch it and then you release it, the more effect it will have. And so stretching is not necessarily a bad thing, as you all suggest, that it can contribute to even further growth.
That's right.
In other words, the more of a discomfort you have, although we're not necessarily promoting pain, but
That's right.
you have to at least get out of that comfort zone.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Nothing happens good in your comfort zone.
And really, if you take a moment to really reflect, if you do law of reflection, and realize, and you turn back when you go through that pain, review that what you've been going through, it's always better at the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just a fear barrier. When we go past the fear barrier of what's holding us back, you look back and go, oh, that wasn't so scary. Why was I so fearful of that? Right? And those are the things that we have to remember, but it's human nature. We're the only ones that kind of cut off our own growth because of that fear factor and being so comfortable in what we are and what we're doing.
Especially when you realize that the benefits or the advantages of doing that, of stretching. And it's kind of like what the scripture says, if we wanted to bring in the scripture, that someplace, I forget the verse, but it says that no eye has seen, ear heard the good things that God has for us. And so we don't know, but we have to go through in order to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, again, it's challenging for any of us to do that because we don't like pain, we don't like stretching.
That's right.
But anyway, that's what we
get
have.
Through some area.
That's
right?
good. You get through some area.
area.
Yeah, there was a pastor that had, because I'm talking about scripture, had talked about going through trials, going through some tribulation, which brings us like kind of the law of pain, and brings us to the law of the rubber band, and how that tension can create growth. You know, and how the apostles, Jesus said, we need to go to a certain, in scripture, we go to a certain area for preaching, but Jesus said, we're going to go through Samaria, which was very uncommon in historical figure, because Samaria was not a place that Jews would go, and they would not go through that area. They would have to go around. They'd take the long way to avoid that area because of the tension. But Jesus said, go through Samaria. So the pastor said, sometimes we have to go through some area of our life. And that's exactly what this is, right? And that's what creates that long-term growth, for sure.
You know, the same is true as with giving. And we don't have time to get into this, but the more you give, the more you will receive. And so it's a principle, it's a law. But if and some people say that you can't get anything if your hand is closed.
Yeah.
But if it's open, then things will go out, but
and they'll come in.
Things will come back.
That's right. Yeah, I love that. It leaves room. Matter of fact,
that's John Maxwell uses that.
He uses that a lot.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're not going to get to it, but that the 15th law, the law of contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly.
It helps with that as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let's move on to this law of trade-offs, and then we're going to need to close the show because time is waning.
Yeah.
The law of trade-offs. Now, this particular law I had more of a problem with as far as understanding what it was about. Maybe you can shed some light on my misunderstanding of this particular law as far as trade-offs are concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because at first, when I first read through it, I had a difficult time with it too. Trade-offs was like, well, what's that supposed to mean?
I'll tell you why, because humans don't want to give up anything.
Yeah.
Our natural tendency is to get, not to give.
Mm-hmm.
And trade-offs means we have to give up something,
right,
in order to gain something, right? And in fact, John Maxwell says you have to give up to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I give you a perfect analogy. Okay, is that, and look at whether it comes to dieting or exercise or what have you. I mean, there was a time that I was a smoker. I was a long time. I smoked for 22 years, cigarettes for 22 years. And it got to a point where I'm like, well, I've got to make some changes. Body starts feeling a certain way as we get older, and I've got to make some changes. Well, if I didn't give up cigarette smoking, was I really going to be able to run on the treadmill any longer? No, I've got to give up that because it's prohibiting my lungs from breathing well so I can run on the treadmill, right? You've got to give up one thing in order to grow into another thing. And that can go from anything from business to personal life to spirituality to relationships. There's that trade-offs that have to happen.
And I mentioned giving, and that's, again, yet another example. You have to kind of give up something in order to get more in return. So,
exactly.
Well, listen, this has been a very interesting discussion. And I'd like to tell our audience that Lou and Sherry will be back with us for a final time next week. And we certainly look forward to that. We have, I believe, 4 more of Maxwell's laws to review, and you don't want to miss any of that. But before we close today's program, give the people your contact information again.
Sure.
Yep. We're on LinkedIn as well as Facebook as well as Instagram. But please reach out to us on our website is LouEverettPart2.com. We have our phone number there and also our calendar. Love to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, let's chat.
Great. And to our listening and audience and viewing audience, I'd like to say, as always, regardless of what you may be going through, whether it's good or bad, just keep this in mind, that there's always more good things coming your way. So we'll be seeing you the next time.